I got a call from my son. Your beach house and car are sold. We're leaving tomorrow. My name is Bettie Johnson, and at 58 years old, I never imagined my only son would betray me like this. I dedicated my entire life to raising Jason after losing my husband when our boy was just 5. Yesterday, I received a call that shattered my world. Mom, I sold your beach house and car. We're leaving for California tomorrow. The strange part. Instead of falling apart, I replied calmly, I understand, but you forgot something. His confusion gave me strength I didn't know I had. Let me know where you're watching from. In the comments, hit that like and subscribe button and stay with me to discover how I reclaimed my power from the person I trusted most. I always believed my son and I shared an unbreakable bond. After Thomas, my husband died suddenly from a heart attack when Jason was only 5 years old. It was just the two of us against the world. I still remember the night after the funeral, holding my little boy as he cried himself to sleep, promising him that I would always be there, that we would be okay. I didn't know then how challenging it would be to keep that promise, but I was determined to give him the life Thomas would have wanted for him. I threw myself into my career as an educator, eventually becoming a high school principal in our small Maine coastal town. Every decision I made centered around providing stability and opportunities for Jason. There were so many nights I stayed up grading papers or working on administrative tasks after putting him to bed, surviving on coffee and determination. We lived modestly in a small 2-bedroom apartment, saving every extra penny for Jason's education. When other single mothers dated and remarried, I focused solely on raising my son. It wasn't that I never felt lonely. There were countless nights I cried silently into my pillow, missing adult companionship. But watching Jason grow into a bright, compassionate young man made every sacrifice worthwhile. His smile when he made the honor roll, his excitement when he scored the winning goal in soccer. These moments sustained me through the hardest times. I remember the day Jason got accepted to Boston University with a partial scholarship. We both cried tears of joy, knowing Thomas would have been so proud. Even with the scholarship, tuition was expensive, but I had been saving since he was born. I took on extra administrative work during summers and weekends to ensure he could focus on his studies without worrying about money. It was during his sophomore year at BU that Jason met Diana. He called me one evening, his voice brimming with excitement as he told me about this beautiful, intelligent girl from his economics class. They had been paired for a project, and he couldn't stop talking about her. As Jason described their first date, I felt a mixture of happiness and a twinge of something else, perhaps a realization that our dynamic was changing. Diana came from a wealthy family in Connecticut. Her father owned a successful investment firm, and she had grown up with privileges Jason had never known. The first time Jason brought her home during spring break, I noticed her subtle looks around our modest apartment, the slight furrow in her brow as she took in our simple furnishings. But she was unfailingly polite, complimenting my cooking and asking thoughtful questions about my work. Over time, I watched as Jason began adopting Diana's tastes and expectations. The simple pleasures that had once made him happy seemed to no longer satisfy him. He started talking about the vacation homes her family owned, the cars they drove, the restaurants they frequented. I tried to be supportive, but I worried about the values I had worked so hard to instill in him: appreciation for what we had, understanding the difference between needs and wants, recognizing that true wealth isn't measured by possessions. After they married, I gave them nearly all my savings as a down payment for their first house, a gesture that stretched my finances thin but felt like the right thing to do. I wanted them to start their life together on solid ground. Diana's parents gave them an extravagant wedding and a luxury car as gifts. I couldn't compete with such generosity, but I gave them what mattered most to me, my financial security. 3 years ago, I finally retired from my position as principal. After decades of putting others first, my students, my faculty, and especially Jason, I finally had the chance to fulfill my own dream. I used my retirement fund to purchase a modest beach house in Maine. It wasn't large or luxurious, but sitting on the porch, watching the waves, I finally felt at peace. The small 2-bedroom cottage, with weathered blue siding, represented everything I had worked for. I invited Jason and Diana and their 2 children to visit often, imagining summers, building sandcastles with my grandchildren, and teaching them to swim in the ocean. But their visits became increasingly infrequent. When they did come, Diana would make comments about how the house needed updating or how I should invest in better furniture. Jason, who once shared my appreciation for simple pleasures, now nodded in agreement with his wife. During their last visit 6 months ago, I overheard them discussing my finances. They were sitting on the deck, unaware that I was approaching with a tray of lemonade. "Your mother could easily afford a nicer place than this," Diana was saying. "She must have substantial retirement savings. Why does she insist on living so frugally?" "Mom's always been careful with money," Jason replied. "But you're right. She must have a decent nest egg tucked away. Maybe we should talk to her about better investment opportunities." I retreated quietly, the lemonade, untouched, a heaviness settling in my chest. Something in their tone bothered me, a calculating quality that seemed at odds with genuine concern for my well-being. That evening during dinner, they asked pointed questions about my financial advisor, my accounts, and whether I had updated my will recently. I deflected with vague answers, something in my mother's intuition urging caution. After they left, I called my longtime friend Grace, who had worked in banking for 30 years before her retirement. "Something doesn't feel right," I told her. "They've never shown this much interest in my finances before." Grace's response chilled me. "Betty, be careful. I've seen this pattern before with my clients. Adult children suddenly getting interested in their parents' finances, and it rarely ends well." I didn't want to believe her. This was Jason, my son, my only child, the boy I had raised with values of honesty and integrity. But as I hung up the phone and looked around at my beloved beach house, a small seed of doubt had been planted. A doubt that would unfortunately prove well-founded in the months to come. The emotional distance between Jason, Diana, and me continued growing through the fall and into winter. Their once monthly visits dwindled to holidays only, and even those felt strained. My grandchildren, Emma and Lucas, still greeted me with enthusiastic hugs, but at 7 and 5 years old, they were already developing tastes beyond their means. Emma would tell me about her horseback riding lessons, Lucas about his private swimming coach. Each activity, they mentioned, cost more than my monthly pension. When I called to check in, Jason would rush through our conversations. "Sorry, Mom, we're headed to a dinner party." Or, "Diana's parents are in town," became common explanations. I tried not to take it personally, but the contrast to our once close relationship was stark and painful. I'd sit in my beach house afterward, the sound of the waves outside a lonely soundtrack to my thoughts. It wasn't that I expected to be the center of Jason's life. I had raised him to be independent, to build his own family and future. But the growing sense that I was being deliberately kept at arm's length hurt more than I wanted to admit. 5 years ago, when they were first married, I had given Jason and Diana $60,000 toward their down payment. It was most of my savings outside my retirement accounts, but I'd offered it gladly, wanting to help them start their life together without the burden of excessive debt. Diana's parents had matched my contribution, allowing them to purchase a beautiful colonial in an exclusive neighborhood. "Are you sure, Mom?" Jason had asked when I presented them with the check. "This is so much money." "I've been saving for your future since you were born," I told him. This is exactly what it was meant for. Diana had hugged me then, one of the few times she initiated physical affection with me. "We'll make you proud," she promised, "and we'll pay you back someday." I had waved away that suggestion. It's a gift, not a loan. Just be happy. Now looking back, I wondered if that substantial gift had changed how they viewed me. Not as a parent who had sacrificed, but as a potential source of continuing financial support. The first request came about a year after they moved into their new home. Jason called his voice casual, but with an undercurrent of tension. "Mom, I hate to ask, but Diana and I are looking at remodeling our kitchen. The contractor we want is available now, but we're a bit short. Could you possibly help us out? Maybe $10,000. We'd pay you back in a few months when my year-end bonus comes in." I agreed, of course, though it meant dipping into funds I'd set aside for house repairs. I trusted Jason's promise to repay the loan. 6 months later, when I gently reminded him about the repayment, he seemed genuinely surprised. "Oh, right. Things have been tight with the baby coming. Can we push that back a bit?" The repayment never came. Instead, there were more requests. For Emma's preschool tuition, for a second car, when their first luxury vehicle proved impractical, with children for landscaping their yard. Each time, the promised repayment was delayed, then forgotten. Meanwhile, I noticed their social media posts showing lavish vacations, designer clothes, renovations to their already beautiful home. Each image sparked a complicated mixture of emotions: happiness that they were enjoying life, concern about their apparent spending habits, and growing resentment that they continued asking for my financial help while living so extravagantly. When I purchased my beach house using the bulk of my retirement savings, Jason's reaction had surprised me. Rather than sharing my excitement about this dream fulfilled, he'd frowned. "Mom, are you sure this is a good investment? Beachfront property requires a lot of maintenance. And what about healthcare costs as you age? Have you factored those in?" His concerns might have seemed reasonable, if not for the timing. He had called the day after asking me for money to cover Lucas's private preschool deposit. The juxtaposition was jarring, highlighting a growing pattern I didn't want to acknowledge. During Thanksgiving last year, I overheard a heated conversation between Jason and Diana in the guest bedroom. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but as I walked past with clean towels, their raised voices carried clearly through the partially open door. "We have to tell them we can't make the payment this month," Jason was saying, his voice strained. "Absolutely not," Diana hissed back. "My parents already think you're not managing the business properly. We cannot ask them for more money right now." "Then what do you suggest?" "The credit cards are maxed out, and the bank won't extend our line of credit." "Figure it out, Jason. That's your job. Sell something if you have to, but do not embarrass me in front of my family." I had quietly retreated the towels clutched to my chest, my heart racing. Jason had started his own financial consulting business 3 years earlier, with significant investment from Diana's parents. He had always spoken of it as thriving growing. This was the first indication I'd had that they might be in financial trouble. When I tried to broach the subject the next day, asking casually how the business was going, Jason brushed it off with practiced confidence. "Never better, Mom. We're expanding into new markets next quarter." His smile didn't reach his eyes. I offered to help, drawing on my years of managing school budgets. "I may not understand high finance, but I know how to balance books. If you need another set of eyes..." "Thanks, but everything's under control," he interrupted, a flash of annoyance crossing his face. "Let's not talk business during the holidays." A month later, I ran into Thomas Werner, an old family friend whose son had gone to school with Jason. After catching up briefly, Thomas mentioned something that sent a chill through me. "I was sorry to hear about Jason's business troubles," he said, his expression sympathetic. "My son told me they're facing bankruptcy. If there's anything I can do to help..." I managed to maintain my composure, thanking Thomas, while acting as though I was aware of the situation. Inside, I felt as though the ground was shifting beneath my feet. My son's business failing bankruptcy, and he hadn't said a word to me. That evening, I called Grace again, sharing what I'd learned. "Betty," she said slowly, "given what you've told me about their questions regarding your finances, and now this, I think you need to be very careful. Financial desperation can make people do things they'd never otherwise consider." "This is Jason we're talking about," I protested. "My son, he wouldn't..." "I hope you're right," Grace replied. "But please promise me you'll keep your financial documents secure. Don't sign anything without reading it carefully. And maybe call your bank, make sure everything looks normal with your accounts." I promised more to ease her concern than because I believed such precautions necessary. Jason might be in financial trouble, might even have been hiding that trouble from me, but surely he wouldn't cross certain lines. He was my son. I had raised him better than that. How painfully naive that confidence would prove to be. The shift in Jason's behavior became more pronounced in the weeks that followed. After months of infrequent contact, he suddenly began calling several times a week. His questions about my well-being always seemed to circle back to financial matters. "How's the beach house, Mom? Any major repairs needed?" He would ask, then smoothly transition to, "Have you been happy with your investment returns lately? I've been researching some opportunities that might work well for someone in your position." During one visit, he brought a folder of documents. "Just some tax planning paperwork," he explained casually. "With my business experience, I can help you minimize your tax burden. These just give me access to consult on your behalf." I glanced at the papers, noting the dense legal language. Something felt off. "Let me have my accountant look these over first," I said, setting them aside. Jason's smile tightened. "No need to waste his time, Mom. These are standard forms. But sure, if it makes you feel better." He left the papers, but his disappointment was palpable. I never signed them. Instead, I asked Grace to look them over. Her expression grew increasingly alarmed as she read. "Betty, this isn't just tax paperwork. This is a power of attorney form that would give Jason complete control over your finances. And this other document, it would add him as a joint owner on your accounts." She looked up at me, her eyes serious. "This goes way beyond tax planning." I felt physically ill. "There must be some misunderstanding," I said weakly. "He wouldn't deliberately mislead me like that." Grace's response was gentle but firm. "Maybe there is a misunderstanding, but please promise me you'll be more vigilant. Something doesn't add up here." A week later, I realized I hadn't received my bank statement in the mail. When I called the bank to inquire, the representative informed me that my mailing address had been changed. The statements were now going to Jason and Diana's address. "I didn't authorize that change," I said, my voice shaking. It was changed online using your security information, the representative explained. We can change it back right away and add extra security to your account. That evening, I discovered that it wasn't just my bank statements. My investment account statements, credit card bills, even my utility notices had all been redirected. Someone, and I could guess who, had systematically diverted my financial information away from me. With growing dread, I contacted each institution, changing my address back and strengthening security measures. I learned that there had been multiple attempts to access my accounts online. Some had been successful. The next morning, I called Robert Davis, a lawyer I had worked with during my years as a principal. I explained the situation, trying to keep my voice steady, despite the betrayal knotting my stomach. I need to protect myself, I concluded. But he's my son. I don't want to involve the police if I can avoid it. Robert's advice was compassionate but clear. First, we secure everything, change all passwords, add phone verification to accounts, check your credit report for any new accounts or loans you didn't authorize. Then, we document everything: the diverted mail, the misleading documents, any unusual account activity. And then, I asked, dreading his answer. Then we wait, he said simply. We watch for any further attempts, and you need to decide how you want to handle this if there are more violations of your trust. I spent the next few days in a fog of disbelief and heartache, following Robert's instructions mechanically. How had we come to this? What had happened to the sweet boy who once made me handmade Mother's Day cards, who cried when he accidentally broke my favorite mug, who promised to take care of me when I got old? I found myself sitting on my beach house porch late into the evening, watching the waves crash against the shore. The rhythmic sound that usually brought me peace now failed to calm the storm in my heart. The betrayal cut so deep precisely because of how much I loved him, because I knew the good in him, the values I had raised him with, which made his actions all the more incomprehensible. As the sun set on the third day of this vigil, my phone rang. It was Jason. Taking a deep breath, I answered with forced cheerfulness. "Hi, honey. How are you?" His voice was oddly animated, almost manic in its enthusiasm. "Great news, Mom. I've been working on something big for all of us." Something in his tone sent warning signals flaring through my mind. I gripped the phone tighter and braced myself for what was coming. "Mom, I sold your beach house and car," Jason announced, his voice brimming with an excitement that felt jarringly disconnected from the bombshell he had just dropped. "We're leaving for California tomorrow. It's the fresh start we all need." The world seemed to tilt sideways. I gripped the porch railing with my free hand, steadying myself as the implications of his words crashed over me, like the waves on the shore below. My home, my car, the tangible symbols of my hard-earned retirement, my independence, gone with a phone call. "You did what?" I managed to ask, keeping my voice surprisingly level despite the earthquake happening inside me. "I know it seems sudden," Jason continued, either oblivious to or deliberately ignoring my shock. "But it's really the perfect solution for everyone. That beach house is too much maintenance for you at your age. The new buyers are paying cash, and we close tomorrow afternoon. Diana's already found us a beautiful place in San Diego. Great schools for the kids, amazing weather, and some incredible business opportunities for me." "Jason," I interrupted, my mind racing to process this information, to understand how this could possibly be happening. "How exactly did you sell my house And car, I never authorized any sale. There was a slight pause, a momentary hesitation, before his reply came with forced confidence. With the power of attorney you signed, remember that paperwork from a few months back, for tax purposes. It gave me authority to handle your finances and property. It's all completely legal. The power of attorney I had never signed. The documents Grace had warned me about. Had he forged my signature? The thought made me physically ill. And this is all happening tomorrow? I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady, to give away nothing of the rage and heartbreak threatening to overwhelm me. Yes, isn't it exciting? We'll use the proceeds from your house and car to get established in California. It's really the best thing for all of us. The house here isn't selling in this market, but once we're settled, you can move in with us. We'll have a guest room ready for you. The casual way he discussed disposing of everything I had worked for, the presumption that I would simply follow along with his plans, left me momentarily speechless. In that silence, I heard the truth beneath his enthusiastic pitch my son had stolen from me. He had betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible. And yet, something deep inside me, perhaps the educator who had faced countless challenges with strategic calm, or perhaps simply the mother who had raised this man and knew him better than anyone, refused to collapse into helpless victimhood. A clarity descended, cutting through the emotional chaos. I understand, I said, my voice now perfectly calm. But you forgot something important. What? Jason asked, confusion evident in his voice. What are you talking about? I almost smiled, picturing his furrowed brow, the same expression he'd worn as a child when faced with an unexpected obstacle. Oh, just a small detail. We can discuss it when you come by tomorrow. What time should I expect you? Probably around 10, he replied, clearly thrown by my calm acceptance. Are you okay with all this, Mom? I'll see you at 10, I said simply, and ended the call before my composure could crack. The moment the line disconnected, I took action. First, I called Robert, my lawyer, and explained the situation in rapid, precise terms. He claims to have sold my house and car using a power of attorney I never signed. They're supposedly closing tomorrow. Robert's response was immediate and decisive. I'm calling Judge Lancaster right now for an emergency injunction. Then the police. Don't confront Jason alone. We need to document everything legally. Next, I called Grace, who promised to be at my house first thing in the morning, with documentation of all my accounts. Finally, I contacted the local police, explaining the situation as calmly as I could. The officer who took my call was sympathetic, but clear about the complexities of family financial fraud. We'll send someone tomorrow morning, he assured me. Try to gather any evidence of the forgery and unauthorized sales. That night, I barely slept. I moved through my beloved beach house, touching the worn wood of the banister, looking out at the moonlit ocean from my bedroom window, cataloging each memory this place held. The rage I felt toward Jason was equaled only by my determination not to let him take what was mine. Not just the physical property, but my dignity, my agency, my power. By morning, I had moved beyond shock and grief to a place of cold, clear resolve. If Jason thought I would passively accept his betrayal, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. The woman who had single-handedly raised him while building a career, the principal who had managed faculty politics and school board demands for decades. That woman was not someone to be underestimated. As the sun rose over the Atlantic, casting golden light across my porch, I made coffee and waited for the pieces of my counteroffensive to arrive. Whatever happened next, I would face it, on my feet, not my knees. By 9:30 the next morning, my beach house had become an impromptu command center. Robert sat at my dining table, surrounded by legal documents, and speaking intently on his phone to a judge he knew. Grace occupied the other end of the table, her laptop open, and multiple folders spread before her. Officer Thompson, a steady-eyed woman in her 40s, stood by the window, occasionally checking her watch. "The documents are clearly fraudulent," Robert was saying, holding up a paper with what purported to be my signature. "My client never signed this power of attorney." Grace nodded emphatically. "And I have the original documents she refused to sign right here with her notes in the margins, questioning these exact provisions. I moved between them, providing information, signing the emergency injunctions Robert had prepared, and trying to calm the storm of emotions, threatening my carefully maintained composure. The betrayal cut deep, but beneath the pain was something else, a steely determination I hadn't felt in years. At precisely 10 o'clock, the crunch of tires on gravel announced Jason's arrival. Through the front window, I watched as he and Diana emerged from their luxury SUV. They looked confident, dressed in expensive casual wear, as if they were simply stopping by on their way to a bright future. Jason opened the back door, and my grandchildren tumbled out. Emma, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit, Lucas racing immediately toward the beach. "Stay where I can see you," Diana called to them, her voice carrying through the open windows. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and nodded to Officer Thompson. She moved to position herself discreetly in the kitchen, visible but not immediately obvious upon entering. The knock came moments later, casual, familiar, the knock of someone who expected to be welcomed. I opened the door myself, meeting my son's eyes directly. "Mom," he began, leaning in for our customary hug. He faltered when I didn't move to embrace him, his gaze shifting past me to take in Robert and Grace at the dining table. "What's going on? Who are these people? Please come in," I said, my voice steady. "Diana, too. The children can play on the porch if they'd like." Confusion clouded Jason's features, but he stepped inside Diana, following closely behind. Her eyes narrowed as she surveyed the scene quicker than Jason, to sense something was amiss. "Mom, is everything okay?" Jason asked, his tone a practiced blend of concern and confusion. "No, Jason, everything is not okay," I replied, gesturing toward the dining table. "Please have a seat. We have some important matters to discuss before any house closing today." Diana's hand flew to Jason's arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging visibly into his sleeve. "Jason, what's happening here?" Before he could answer, Officer Thompson stepped forward from the kitchen, her badge clearly visible on her belt. "Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, I'm Officer Thompson with the Maine State Police. We're here investigating allegations of fraud and unauthorized property sales." The color drained from Jason's face. For a moment, he looked like the little boy who had been caught drawing on the walls with permanent marker. Stunned, guilty, already calculating possible escapes from consequence. "This is ridiculous," Diana interjected, her voice sharp. "Jason has power of attorney for his mother. Everything is completely legal." Robert stood, extending a document toward them. "Actually, that's precisely the issue. This power of attorney appears to have been forged. Ms. Johnson never signed it, which makes any actions taken under its authority fraudulent and potentially criminal." Jason swayed slightly, reaching for the back of a chair to steady himself. "Mom, there's been a misunderstanding. We talked about all this. You agreed. I never agreed to sell my home or my car. I interrupted, my voice firm, but not unkind. I never signed any power of attorney. You know that, Jason. Show them the documentation, Diana urged Jason, her voice rising. Tell them about our conversations. Jason's eyes darted between us, a cornered animal seeking escape. I don't have it with me. It's packed with our things. Grace spoke up, then her familiar voice, carrying the authority of decades in banking. We've already contacted the title company and the car dealership. All sales have been temporarily frozen, pending investigation of the authorization documents. The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, I could hear my grandchildren laughing as they chased seagulls, blissfully unaware of the drama unfolding inside. Finally, Diana broke the standoff, her composure cracking. You have no idea what we've been through. Jason's business is failing. We're drowning in debt. And you sit here in this house that you don't even need while we're about to lose everything. Diana, Jason cautioned, but she was beyond restraint now. No, I'm tired of pretending. Your mother has always been selfish, hoarding her money when she could be helping us. We deserve that money more than she does. What does she need it for at her age? Officer Thompson stepped forward. Mrs. Johnson, I need to advise you that you're making statements that could be used as evidence of premeditated financial fraud. Diana fell silent, her cheeks flushed with anger and embarrassment. I looked at my son, truly looked at him, and saw a stranger. The values I thought I had instilled, the character I believed I had helped shape, seemed entirely absent in this moment. Yet, beneath my disappointment and anger, I still saw glimpses of the boy I had raised, now trapped in a web, partly of his own making. Jason, I said quietly, I need to know exactly what you've done with my accounts, my property, and any other assets you've accessed without my permission. He sank into a chair, shoulders slumping in defeat. It started small. He began, his voice barely audible. Just moving some money between your accounts to cover our mortgage when we fell behind. I was going to pay it back before you noticed. How much? Grace asked sharply. $20,000 at first. Then another 30 when the business lost our biggest client. I closed my eyes, briefly absorbing the magnitude of the betrayal. In the house, the car, were you really planning to take that money and disappear to California? Jason looked up, his eyes wet with unshed tears. We're facing bankruptcy, Mom. Diana's parents have already bailed us out twice and refused to do more. The house is underwater on the mortgage. The credit cards are maxed out. California was a fresh start. With my money, I finished for him. Without my consent, Diana, recovering her composure, straightened her shoulders. It would have benefited all of us. You would have had a place to live with us. The children need their grandmother. It made perfect sense. Except for the part where you stole from me and forged my signature, I replied evenly. Except for the complete violation of trust. Officer Thompson moved closer. Mr. Johnson, based on what we've heard, there are grounds for criminal charges of fraud, forgery, and attempted grand theft. Before we proceed further, I need to ask if you're willing to make a formal statement. The reality of his situation seemed to finally penetrate Jason's shock. Criminal charges? Mom, you wouldn't press charges against your own son, would you? The question hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. In his mind, our relationship was a shield he could hide behind, a guarantee that consequences wouldn't follow his actions. The realization broke something loose inside me. Not just anger, but a profound sadness for what our relationship had become. I have an alternative proposal. I said after a moment, looking between Jason, Diana, and Officer Thompson. One that might avoid criminal proceedings, depending on your cooperation. Robert raised an eyebrow, but didn't interrupt. He knew me well enough to trust my judgment. I'm listening, Jason said quickly, desperation evident in his voice. First, you will provide a complete accounting of every transaction you've made involving my finances, every document you've signed in my name, every account you've accessed. Second, you will return any funds taken from my accounts. Grace will help determine that amount. Third, you will undergo financial counseling as a couple with regular verification that you're living within your means. I paused, making sure they understood the gravity of what I was offering. In return, I won't press criminal charges, provided there are no further attempts to access my finances without explicit, documented permission. Diana started to protest, but Jason silenced her with a look. And the bankruptcy, our house, the children's schools. Those are consequences of your choices, not mine. I replied, feeling a strange calm despite the devastation around us. I'll help you find resources for financial planning and debt management, but I won't enable behavior that led to this situation in the first place. Officer Thompson cleared her throat. This arrangement would need to be formalized through the prosecutor's office if you want to avoid criminal charges. Robert nodded. I can draw up the necessary documentation today. But, he added, looking directly at Jason and Diana, any violation of these terms would result in immediate prosecution. The weight of the moment settled over the room. Outside, Lucas called for his father, his small voice a poignant reminder of the innocent lives caught in the fallout of adult decisions. Jason looked at me, his expression a complex mixture of shame, relief, and something else. Perhaps the first glimmer of genuine remorse. Thank you, he whispered. I know I don't deserve your mercy. No, you don't, I agreed, my heart aching despite my resolve. But those children deserve a father who isn't in prison, and I choose to believe that somewhere inside you is still the son I raised to know right from wrong. Diana remained silent, her earlier defiance replaced by a tight-lipped acceptance of their limited options. As they left that day, paperwork in hand, and a meeting with the prosecutor scheduled for the following morning, I stood on my porch watching them go. The children waved enthusiastically from the back seat, unaware of how close their family had come to complete collapse. Grace came to stand beside me, her hand warm on my shoulder. You did the right thing, she said quietly. Both the compassionate thing and the smart thing. I nodded, unable to speak past the knot in my throat. The victory felt hollow, the wound of betrayal still raw. But as I watched their car disappear down the winding coastal road, I felt something else beneath the pain, a sense of my own strength rediscovered when I needed it most. They forgot something important, I said, finally turning to Grace with the ghost of a smile. What's that? She asked. They forgot who they were dealing with. I didn't raise my son to be a thief, but I also didn't raise him to be a very good one. The joke was weak, but it broke the tension, allowing the first tentative steps toward healing. That evening, alone in the beach house that remained mine, I watched the sunset from my porch. The house that Jason had tried to sell out from under me now felt different. Not just a symbol of my retirement dreams, but a testament to my resilience. This place, like me, had weathered storms before and remained standing. The months following that confrontation were among the most difficult of my life. The legal process of documenting the fraud, reversing the attempted property sales, and establishing safeguards against future exploitation was exhausting. More draining still was the emotional aftermath, rebuilding my relationship with my son and his family from the ashes of betrayal. Jason and Diana attended their court-mandated financial counseling sessions with initial resentment that gradually gave way to genuine engagement. The counselor, a no-nonsense woman named Irene, didn't allow them to deflect responsibility or blame external circumstances for their situation. Your financial problems weren't caused by the economy or bad luck, she told them during a session I was invited to attend. They were caused by living beyond your means and viewing debt as an acceptable long-term strategy. Diana had bristled at first her privileged upbringing, leaving her ill-equipped to accept such direct criticism. But over time, even she began to acknowledge the reality of their situation. They sold their oversized house, moved to a more modest rental, and withdrew the children from their expensive private schools. The transition wasn't easy for any of them. Diana struggled with explaining to her parents and friends why they had downsized. Jason faced the humiliation of bankruptcy proceedings for his business. The children, especially Emma at 7, didn't understand why they could no longer take horseback riding lessons or shop at expensive stores. I maintained my distance. During these first difficult months, our contact limited to supervised visits with the grandchildren and formal meetings regarding the legal agreements. The wound was too fresh, the trust too thoroughly shattered for anything more. Robert had advised me to keep communication documented and limited, at least until all financial matters were resolved. During this period, I found unexpected support from a group I hadn't known existed. Other parents who had experienced financial exploitation by their adult children. Grace introduced me to the group, which met monthly in a church basement near my beach house. The first meeting, I sat quietly in the back, listening to stories that mirrored my own, with devastating similarity. Parents who had discovered unauthorized loans taken out in their names. Grandparents whose retirement savings had been drained by grandchildren with drug problems. Widows whose stepchildren had manipulated them out of inherited property. Martha, a soft-spoken woman in her 70s, had caught her daughter selling her jewelry piece by piece. Richard, a retired postal worker, had discovered his son had remortgaged his paid-off home using forged documents. Their stories both horrified me and gave me strange comfort. I wasn't alone in this betrayal, nor in my conflicted feelings about it. The hardest part, Martha told me, after I finally shared my story at the third meeting, is that you still love them. If it were a stranger who stole from you, it would be simpler. But when it's your child, someone you raised, and would have given anything for voluntarily, that's the part that keeps you up at night. I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. Despite everything, I still loved Jason. I worried about him, wondered if he was sleeping, if the stress of their financial recovery was affecting his health. I missed our easy conversations, the inside jokes. Only the two of us shared the history we had built together after Thomas died. 6 months after the confrontation, Jason asked to meet with me alone. We chose neutral ground, a coffee shop halfway between our homes. He arrived early, visibly nervous, turning his coffee cup in circles as he waited for me to speak first. "How are the sessions with Irene going?" I asked, finally, breaking the uncomfortable silence. "Good. Hard, but good," he replied, meeting my eyes briefly before looking down again. "She doesn't let us get away with anything, makes us account for every dollar, every decision." "And how does that feel?" He considered the question carefully. humiliating at first. Then, I don't know, clarifying, like I've been living in a fog for years, constantly anxious about money, but never really facing the truth of our situation. I nodded, sipping my tea and waiting for him to continue. "Mom," he said after a long pause, his voice breaking slightly. "I've been trying to find the words to apologize, but everything sounds inadequate. What I did was unforgivable. I betrayed your trust in the worst possible way." "Yes, you did. I agreed not to be cruel, but because pretending otherwise would dishonor us both. I'm not asking for forgiveness," he continued. "I don't deserve that, but I want you to know that I understand now what I did. Not just legally, but to our relationship, to everything you taught me, to everything you sacrificed for me." Tears welled in his eyes, and I was surprised to feel them in my own as well. "Diana and I have been talking a lot about how we got here, about the values we've been living by and teaching the children, about what really matters." For the first time since discovering his betrayal, I felt a flicker of hope. Not naive optimism that everything would quickly return to normal, but hope that something meaningful might eventually be salvaged from the wreckage. "It's going to take time, Jason," I said gently. "Trust, once broken, doesn't mend overnight." "I know," he replied, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand, like he used to do as a boy. "I'm just grateful for the chance to try, to show you over time that I can be the son you deserve." That conversation marked the beginning of a slow, careful reconciliation process. We established clear boundaries around financial discussions. I would not provide monetary help, but I would share wisdom about budgeting and planning if asked. Our interactions focused primarily on rebuilding basic trust through small, consistent actions. Jason began stopping by the beach house to help with maintenance, fixing the loose boards on the deck, painting the shutters, tasks he could complete, while we rebuilt our ability to communicate comfortably. Diana, after initial resistance, started joining these visits, bringing the children and making genuine efforts to connect with me beyond superficial pleasantries. As the seasons changed, so did our relationships. The legal proceedings concluded with Jason and Diana making regular payments to restore the funds they had taken. They attended every financial counseling session, gradually implementing sustainable changes in their lifestyle and priorities. I watched with cautious hope as they sold their luxury cars for modest alternatives, as Diana took a part-time job to contribute to their income, as Jason rebuilt his business with a focus on helping others avoid the financial pitfalls he had experienced. The children adapted to their new circumstances with the resilience of youth, finding joy in simple pleasures rather than expensive activities. For my part, I made changes too. With Robert's help, I established a trust for my assets with proper protections and oversight. I became more involved in financial education for seniors, sharing my story at community centers and retirement homes as a cautionary tale about the importance of vigilance, even with family. The beach house that had nearly been stolen from me became a sanctuary in a new way. Not just my personal retreat, but occasionally a gathering place for other survivors from my support group. Martha Richard and others would join me for weekend potlucks, sharing stories of both heartbreak and healing as we watched the waves from my porch. A year after that fateful phone call, Jason, Diana, and the children came for a weekend visit. As we sat around a bonfire on the beach, Emma leaning against my side while I showed her how to toast the perfect marshmallow, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't thought possible in those dark, early days. "Grandma," Emma said, looking up at me with sticky fingers and earnest eyes, "Dad says you're the strongest person he knows. Is that why you didn't let those people buy your house, even though they wanted to?" I caught Jason's gaze across the fire, saw the mixture of shame and gratitude in his expression. The story they had told the children was a simplified version of events, that some confusion had occurred about the house being for sale when it wasn't. "Strength comes in many forms, sweet girl," I replied, smoothing her hair. "Sometimes it's about standing up for yourself, and sometimes it's about giving people the chance to make things right when they've made a mistake." Later, as the children slept and Diana walked along the shoreline collecting shells, Jason joined me on the porch swing. "They're all doing a special project at school about heroes," he explained, referring to Emma's earlier question. "She chose you, said you were brave and smart, and didn't let bad things happen without fighting back." I smiled, watching the moonlight on the water. "Out of the mouths of babes." "She's right, you know," he said quietly. "You could have had me arrested, could have cut us off completely. No one would have blamed you." "Perhaps," I acknowledged. "But then we wouldn't be sitting here now, would we? And despite everything, Jason, I never stopped loving you, being hurt by you, being angry with you, being disappointed in you. None of that erased the love." He was silent for a long moment, the swing creaking gently beneath us. "I don't think I understood what love really meant until I saw how you handled what I did," he finally said. "Not just saying the words, but showing it through actions, even the hard ones." The wisdom in his observation surprised me, evidence of genuine growth through this painful journey. "We're going to be okay, aren't we?" he asked, sounding momentarily like the uncertain little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, looking out at the ocean, endless, powerful, yet ultimately healing in its constancy. I nodded. "Yes, I believe we are. Different than before, perhaps wiser, certainly more cautious, but okay." As Diana rejoined us, her hands full of perfectly formed shells to show the children in the morning, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for this second chance, this opportunity to rebuild what had seemed irreparably broken. The betrayal had changed us all, but perhaps in some unexpected ways for the better. The house that Jason had tried to sell out from under me had become the place where our family found its way back to solid ground. Not through easy forgiveness or simple solutions, but through the harder, more meaningful work of genuine accountability, changed behavior, and cautious hope. Have you ever experienced betrayal by someone you trusted completely? How did you find the strength to move forward? Share your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that even after the deepest betrayals, healing is possible. Thank you for listening, and remember that your response to hardship reveals your true character more than the hardship itself.